This is my presentation on human height dataset. So this dataset right here was actually found through the Our World in Data website. That's how I originally found it. So a description of the dataset is that the dataset applies a Bayesian hierarchical model to estimate trends from 1985 to 2019 in mean height and mean BMI in 1 year age groups for ages 5 to 19. So the data set basically, you can see lists in the columns, the country, the sex, the year, the age group, mean height, lower 95 percentile uncertainty interval, upper 95% uncertainty interval, and the mean height standard error. The data set was actually pulled in data from 2,181 population-based studies with measurements of height and weight in 65 million participants in 200 countries and territories. It was actually created. This data set was compiled by the NCD risk factor, which is a risk factor that it's a website or like an organization that compiles data on communicable diseases. How would you use this data? So you could use this data for many reasons. You can use it to assess the nutritional status of children and adolescents over the years. So the countries with a very low average height, that would most likely mean they have some sort of nutritional imbalances in their diet, whereas the countries with taller heights may have better balances in their nutritional status. It can also be used for comparative studies to compare growth patterns from one country to another. So my process on how I made this data sheet. So I decided to make it through Google Slides, because there's a lot of information here to uncover, and I thought it would be the best way to present all that information. But I started off with one of the links you gave us in class, and I looked up human height, which I was really interested in. So basically, this is where it all started. This is where I got the original article from, and then I saw the and then it was sourced to the original database or the data set, which is this one right here. So as you can see, it's a very long data set, basically kind of covers 200 countries. And finishing up my data sheet, I basically went through every question in the example you gave us. And a lot of the questions I realized were quite similar. So I didn't answer all of them specifically, but the questions I did answer tackled every single question that was shown in the example. And after I was done with my data sheet, I decided to create a nutrition label as shown, similar to the one you gave me, the example you gave us. Talked about the main content of the data table or the data set, talked about the data values in the columns and the use cases. And some of the feedback that was given to me based on my nutrition label is on my original data sheet. So Anthony gave this suggestion to me. Anthony Manico. So he said some of the elements that were clear and useful were that there were 4 different categories and it looked effective. The elements that were confusing were that some parts were a bit redundant, and an additional item you might want to see in the label was a picture representing a data set, and as you can see, I added that in. And going further with this nutritional label type image, I would probably try to make it even more creative, even more visually appealing, and try to add more images, and try to identify some outliers in the data, the averages that really stand out, like the highs and the lows. And yeah, this would really make the nutrition label and the data sheet much more interesting. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.